Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of Sustaining Sustainability for 2021. I wish all of you a very, very happy new year, full of peace, joy, good health, and lots of happiness. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya. I am the professor at the University of Pittsburgh and also the director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I am thrilled to announce that I'm joined by Niren Chaudhary, CEO of Panera Bread, based out of Boston, Massachusetts. Niren and I go back a long way. We both did our undergraduate in St. Stephen's College, Delhi, way back when. Panera Bread operates more than 2,000 bakery cafes across the US and Canada. Niren will discuss safety and access to food services during the COVID-19 pandemic, team building in a virtual setting, and Panera's ambitious environmental sustainability goals. Niren, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. It's great to be on the show.
So, Niren, we've been interviewing people from around the world, and we have a number of international listeners. Could you begin by briefly describing how COVID 19 has impacted the food business in the US and Canada and where things currently stand?
Well, this has been an unprecedented year. And I think there's really no playbook that any one of us have had to learn how to deal with this. So, talking about the restaurant business, it's about 4% of the US economy's GDP, employs 10% of the workforce, but 99% of the restaurants in the US are family owned. And they have been impacted the most during this significant turmoil. Fortunately, I think at Panera, we approached the pandemic with a mindset of how can we use this as a catalyst to become better? How can we become a stronger brand emerging through the pandemic, stronger business model, have a stronger team, a stronger culture? So, some interesting data points for you from pre and post pandemic. So, pre pandemic, our off premise business was about 40% of our sales. It is now 85% of our sales. E commerce was about 35%. It is now 55%. And therefore, taken together, what that has meant is that at the start of the pandemic in March, we were impacted by as much as 50% of our business, we lost. But now we have closed the year in a much stronger position. We are a lot more resilient, and we are down only about negative 10%. But the restaurant industry has been deeply impacted. You have the fast food, quick service restaurants that have actually been a lot more resilient. But on the other hand, fast casual concepts, casual dining concepts have been impacted a lot more.
So, you mentioned Panera emerging stronger and being more resilient. Could you provide some examples of ways in which Panera has tried to support employees during COVID 19?
I really believe at moments like this, we as leaders and indeed as a company, we have to step up and do the right thing for all of our stakeholders, beginning with our associates and our employees. And recognizing that at such times we have to take some very tough actions, but we must do so with the utmost amount of compassion and empathy. And that's how we also treated our associates. So, some examples: when the COVID hit us hard in the beginning of March or April, we had to furlough close to about 35,000 associates. And that's a hard thing to do. However, we wanted to do that with the utmost amount of compassion and empathy for our associates. So, a few examples of what we did: we set up an emergency relief fund wherein we gave grants to all our frontline employees. We provided free meals for the families of our furloughed employees, one meal per week during the period of the furlough, so that they remained connected with us. We did a deal with CVS and Walmart because I read that they were actually hiring people, and we had an arrangement with them whereby they would hire our furloughed associates and then give them back to us once we were ready. And finally, we also partnered with Deepak Chopra and Oprah Winfrey to give access to a wellness program to all of our associates during the pandemic. So, some examples of how, even though we've had to take those tough actions, we have reminded ourselves and held ourselves accountable to do that with empathy and with respect. And I'm happy to announce that as the brand has come back, we have been able to bring back all of our furloughed associates by the end of 2020.
We've been in quarantine for 10 months now. So, how do you foster a positive workplace culture in a virtual setting as a CEO?
I think, that's been such a challenging aspect of this entire transformation. I had to change almost my entire leadership team through the pandemic, and I've done that remotely. Can you imagine that? I've hired almost 80% new executive team members who have come and joined Panera during the pandemic. So some of them I have not even met, personally. I've seen them on Zoom and we've interacted and we continue to run the business, but we haven't met each other. It's incredible. But I think it also kind of talks to the power of technology and the way in which you can actually be connected if you're committed to doing so. And I think just recognizing that you have to compensate for the absence of the physicality of interactions with the way in which you engage on Zoom, meaning that you have to actually create time and deepen the personal and the social connection. So, what I'm very mindful of doing with our team is that, before diving into business on a Zoom call, just taking a few minutes and asking each other how your weekend was, how the family is doing, and whether there's something that we could do to support each other. It is, finding opportunities to recognize people who are doing exceptional work by sending them a home delivered Amazon gift, with a card and a note letting them know how much you appreciate them. I've been actually handwriting notes of recognition and then sending them via text to my colleagues, telling them how much I appreciate what they're doing. If you have the intent to reach out and connect, I do feel that it is possible, even leveraging technology to compensate and do that effectively. Of course, I'm looking forward very much to the time when we can all be together again.
So, now back in April, Panera launched the See a Plate, Fill a Plate challenge to help combat food insecurity during this crisis. Why is it important to you and to other companies to take on these issues of social welfare during this time?
At these times, all of us are feeling a duality of emotions. On the one hand, we are feeling concern, there's anxiety, there's fear, there's uncertainty. But on the other hand, I'm sure you will agree with me, we have never felt more connected with our families. We have never felt more committed to our communities. We've never had a greater sense of responsibility for planet Earth than we did before, So both are happening at the same time. And I think when you have this duality of emotion, I think certainly what I have realized is that this is a moment where we need to step up and do the right thing and build trust. Build trust with all our stakeholders, be it our associates that we talked about, be it customers, or indeed be it our community in which we operate. And in fact, given the significant impact on the community of this pandemic, it would be remiss if leaders and organizations do not step up and do the right thing. So, with that mindset, we have been focused on helping those who've been impacted the most by the pandemic. So, we fed doctors and nurses in New York with 50,000 meals a week when it was raging in New York. We partnered with the USDA to develop a lunch program for children who couldn't access food because schools were closed. And then finally, as you mentioned, the See a Plate, Fill a Plate campaign, recognizing that almost 50 million Americans are suffering from food insecurity and needed help, and that many of the food banks were running out of food. It just felt wrong to me, and it felt that food companies have to step up and be part of that solution, and that's why we pledged as part of See a Plate, Fill a Plate campaign to feed at least 500,000 American families. And I'm glad to say that we were able to make good on that pledge. We call that whole program Together Without Hunger. So I think these are some examples of our intent of actually building trust with the communities that we serve at a time when they need it the most.
Now, Panera has a food promise called Raised Responsibly, which involves shifting to more responsibly sourced ingredients. Could you talk a bit about the business case behind that decision?
Sure. So I think Panera's value proposition is to create great eating experiences that are accessible to all by serving food that is both good and also good for you. That is our value proposition. And some of the reasons to believe that underpin that promise are the ones that you talked about, which is all of our food is fresh. All of our ingredients are clean. There are no artificial flavors and sweeteners and preservatives. All our animal proteins are responsibly raised. And whatever we do on the ingredient side is completely transparent to our customers. So it's a huge part of our commitment and our values, our food values, that underpin and help bring to life this promise of food that tastes great, but also people feel good about eating. Let me share with you how we are constantly raising the bar on this important dimension, because I feel passionately about the impact that food retail businesses like ours can have. So 10 years ago, we were the first brand that became transparent with the calorific value of our food. And we were the first ones to do it, and then it became an industry standard. 10 years later, in 2020, we are now again the first brand to measure the link between food and its carbon footprint impact. I'm sure you're aware that food production contributes to one third of the greenhouse gas emissions and therefore actually contributes to global warming. And therefore, I think it is only responsible for companies like us to be transparent and to make that link visible to our customers that a plate of food that you eat has a carbon footprint. We worked with the World Resources Institute, and we have now defined and measured the carbon footprint for all of our products that we serve at Panera. And in doing so, we were encouraged to learn that almost 55% of the food that we serve is climate friendly. And we have labeled that as cool food. So, for customers for whom this is important, and I passionately believe it should be important to all of us, that we are responsible in our choices that impact global warming, Panera is giving an opportunity to our customers that they can choose the appropriate cool food and therefore have a positive impact on the climate by doing so. So, just gives you an example on how this is, a huge area of passion and a very important area. We want to continuously raise the bar for the entire industry and therefore hope that whatever we do becomes an industry standard.
Have you guys made any changes during the pandemic that you think will remain in place even after COVID 19 is behind us?
Yes, I think, I was saying that we have actually transformed our brand and business through the pandemic in several significant ways. So, the brand, we've actually simplified our menu dramatically. We've reduced the menu complexity by almost 30%. The business model has become stronger. We have 4% higher margins than what we were before. Our team has become much stronger. Like I mentioned, we've hired a world class executive team. And finally, I think our culture in terms of one Panera, franchisees and company partners working together has never been better. So all of those transitions have happened. And as a result, I believe that when the dust finally settles, and I promise you it will, the Panera proposition of food that customers feel good about eating with a higher off premise bias. Like I said, 85% is off premise in the form of drive throughs, delivery, rapid pickup, curbside pickup, and convenient e commerce access, which is now almost 55% of our business. That taken together is the new emerging model for us. We're also thinking of, at the back of these insights, a smaller box, a smaller footprint go forward Panera, with more convenience on the off premise side, with double drive through lanes, more efficient rapid pickup counters, and so forth as we go further out into this year. So I think the proposition will be stronger, more relevant, and I see the business becoming more off-premise orientated and more digitally driven, more e-commerce driven than before, and we are moving in that particular direction.
Now, Niren, we are coming to the close of our time, so I'm going to ask you for two calls to action. So, first, what is the most important message you want to convey to fellow CEOs at this time?
I would love to share, my top reflections and learnings from the pandemic, because, as I said, there's no playbook, and one's had to really learn by doing. But now, with the benefit of hindsight, these are the four key lessons. One is, whenever you have a significant crisis, I think the first thing is to focus on that which you have control over. Take accountability, but focus not on what's happening to you, over which we don't have enough control, but what we have control over. I found that to be terribly empowering. The second is to lead with your heart, which is that even as you make tough decisions, it is possible to do that with compassion and with humanity and with respect. And we must never forget that component of how we take actions. The third, I believe, is one of resilience. I really believe that the human experience in life is nothing but resilience in the face of adversity, and this has been a very trying time. So this spirit of being resilient, of being able to fight the good fight, to get up and fight every single day for our team members, for our associates, for our customers, for our community, I think is a very important attribute. And finally, I think is this metaphor I love using. Think about building windmills and not diving into bunkers. That when there is a storm that is raging outside, think about harnessing the fury of that storm by building a windmill, you know, by embracing it as an opportunity and not diving into a bunker and waiting for the storm to blow over. And I think having that mindset of let me build windmills and therefore become better as a result of this difficulty, I think again is a very empowering thought. So these would be four sort of key learnings that I would want to share with the listeners today.
Eloquently put. And then, very quickly, what call to action would you make to our other listeners?
Well, the pandemic and all the other happenings of last week and in the run up of the year, have been very troubling to see. I mean, I think the loss of lives, I think the attack on the nation, on democracy, and the free will of the people, very disturbing to see, and I'm sure all of us are concerned by it. But I want everyone to remember that whilst that has happened and is true, I think what is also true is that the Senate and the House of Representatives came right back and they finished their job. And that is a huge area of encouragement, builds my confidence in what this country is and what this country can be. I think the one thought I would like to leave with all the listeners is the following. I think what the events of last year have shown that there can be a tremendous amount of anger, frustration, resentment, leading to violence in our communities if we are not careful. And I think we as leaders have to recommit ourselves to always be radically transparent, to always have radical candor in our organizations, to always stand for and uphold the truth. And I really believe that, we may have limited impact on the world around us, but the companies that we steward, let's make those companies a reflection of the world that we wish to see. And that certainly is my commitment, that I want Panera to be a reflection of the world that we wish to see, a culture that is embracing, inclusive, compassionate, respectful, And I think if all of us start doing that in our areas of control, I think we can then transform the nation.
Niren Chaudhary, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
This is your host, CB Bhattacharya, signing off, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next edition of Sustaining Sustainability. And before I sign off, I do want to say that this podcast is made possible by the help of my colleagues, Leslie Marshall, who's the Associate Director of the Center for Sustainable Business, and Alyssa Martinec, who is the Sustainability Coordinator of the Center for Sustainable Business. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya. Bye-bye.